Good morning to everyone, depending on where you are across the country today. My name is Megan Renner, and I want to welcome you to our webinar briefing that is serving today as a briefing both for folks who are attending our in-person Advocacy Day of Action on August 4th in Washington, D.C., and for those who are interested in attending recess appointment visits in their districts, in their home states and communities during the summer recess. Just wanted to go through a few logistical bits this morning, but before we start, first of all, if you're having any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can email office@usbreastfeeding.org, and we can try to help you out from there if you're having an audio or a webinar problem. During today's session, all attendees will be in listen-only mode as usual, but we do invite you to submit questions at any time during the presentation. So we'll be watching those, and we may take some as we're going through different topics, but we will also have a time at the end for a longer question and answer period. To submit your question, you will type it into the questions box on your webinar control panel. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But also want to highlight that, as with all of our webinars, the session is being recorded today. And the recording, the slide deck, and all of the different handout materials and resources that we refer to will be posted in our Advocacy HQ, which is this quick and easy link you see at the bottom, usbreastfeeding.org/advocacy. So do watch for that, and you'll also have a reminder of that link in the follow-up email that you get later this evening. So here is a look at your webinar control panel, just to show you quickly what it will look like to ask a question. If your control panel is perhaps at this moment not expanded, you might be only seeing this little part, this with the orange arrow and the little gray button with the microphone. If you happen to be seeing only that, go ahead and click on that orange arrow, and it'll pop it out to the expanded view for you. And then once you have the expanded view, which is what you see on the left, you should have a box for questions, and it'll have an arrow there as well that you may need to click to open out the questions box, and it'll say type question here. And again, you can type any questions there at any time during the session today. So before we get started with our introductions, I want to launch a quick poll for all of you. We'll be doing a few different polls. So you can see the question you're going to get, and you're going to see it right now on the screen so that you can respond to it. So go ahead and tell us. The question is, will you be taking action this summer as either an individual advocate, representative of a local or a community-based organization, a statewide organization, national, or a government employee? So that could be at any level, but it's helpful to see where there are folks who are working for government, health departments, WIC, et cetera. I'm going to give it just a few more moments here. We've got about 65%, 70% of voting in here. Okay. Great. We've got almost everybody. I'm going to close this out, and I will show you our responses. We had most people, more than half, are on as individuals, but then we have about a third local, a third state, a smaller number of national folks, and even the smallest number is government employees. So thanks, everyone, for doing that. Again, we'll have a couple other polls a bit later. So next, to introduce who we have on the webinar speaking today, of course, I am Megan Renner, the Executive Director of USBC, and you'll also be hearing today from Amelia Pismythe, who is our Deputy Director. She'll speak about a couple of our breastfeeding advocacy asks. And then we are also very pleased to welcome a guest speaker today. Chris Revere is the Director of the Office of Child Health Policy and Advocacy at Nemours, and I'll let him say a little bit more about himself when he starts in just a moment, but he has been, and Nemours has been a great partner of USBC and of breastfeeding, and especially over the last couple of years, we've been very pleased to get to know them better and to work with them on some different breastfeeding projects, especially they're doing some work around child care around the country. So lots of great opportunity here, and we welcome Chris to the webinar today. So just a bit about our objectives for this webinar. Again, this is the pre-briefing webinar both for the in-person Advocacy Day on August 4th. That is, of course, in Washington, D.C., tied to our National Breastfeeding Coalition's conference. And we'll also be briefing folks today on priorities and talking points that you can use if you're doing in-district visits during the August recess. So we'll be providing key information and resources that you can use, including discussing the latest developments on breastfeeding-related legislation and policy, the current status of the Capitol Hill universe, what's going on, the climate out in D.C. Again, talking points and messages that lift up the importance of these policies and programs that we are advocating for to support breastfeeding. And of course, we'll be showing you some outreach tools and materials that you can use for those visits. So just a quick outline of our topics. First, Chris will speak a bit about the state of Congress right now, the current climate, as we mentioned. Then we'll hear from Amelia talking about the Family Act, which is the federal paid leave bill that many of you are probably familiar with, as well as the Supporting Working Moms Act, which is our breastfeeding workplace accommodation bill. And then I'll talk a bit about the TRICARE Mom Improvement Act and what that's all about for coverage of breastfeeding support and supplies for military families. And then I'll also cover some tips and tools and tricks for preparing for your visits at the end.
Excuse me, Megan.
We're going to do one.
This is Amelia, and I wanted to let you know we're still seeing the quick poll results.
Oh,
the slides haven't resulted. Moved with you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so I'll go back to the topics. Just as I just had mentioned, these are the outline of what we'll talk about today. Are you seeing it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So now I'll do poll number 2, and we'll make sure to turn it off this time. This poll is going to launch right now, and we'll be asking you what actions have you taken in the past to share the importance of breastfeeding support programs. So this is another choose all that apply, whether you've sent emails, called your legislator's office, had a visit in person with a legislator or a staffer, engaged in social media. I know we've been doing a lot of tweeting your legislators the last couple of years at USBC, or if you're totally new to the advocacy realm, that is okay. You can also choose that option. So let's see, we'll get it up a few seconds longer. We're getting close to 3/4 of precincts reporting here. We have lots of emails. About half of you have done a call, a visit, or social media so far, and a few who are new to the advocacy realm and have not done advocacy in the past. So, all right, so I'm going to close this out and show you the results. You should now be seeing the results. Again, almost everybody had done an email, and then and now we actually, the second highest was social media, so that's really exciting to see. We are going to talk about some social media opportunities today as well. All right, I will hide that now, and we'll move on. And Chris is going to talk to us now about the current state of affairs. So take it away, Chris.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. And I'm just so pleased to be on the webinar today and really do very much appreciate the invitation. And as you mentioned, Nemours is a very proud partner of USBC. We are a children's health system. We have operations in the Delaware Valley and also across Florida. We own and operate 2 children's hospitals. But I think what makes us even more unique is that we're very much engaged with prevention-based work in the communities that we serve, and have been very active with early care and education environments, as well as with WIC counselors in promoting the importance of breastfeeding. So really it was just very natural for me to accept your invitation because I think Nemours certainly walks the talk in terms of its support. I'm also very proud to say that as an employer, Nemours voluntarily has expanded coverage for moms who are employees of Nemours beyond the current federal statute to all of our employees, and that's roughly 60% of Nemours employees are women of childbearing age. So we have voluntarily said that all of those women have the opportunity to meet with their supervisors and develop a plan to allow them to meet their needs during the workday. So again, I think Nemours certainly has met the challenge and has great respect for the work that USBC and its advocates do. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about what's happening in Washington, D.C. I'm based here in Washington, D.C. I run our Office of Child Health Policy and Advocacy. I've been involved in government relations now for about 25 years. And, I guess what keeps me coming back for more punishment is the fact that each and every year is something new happening in Congress, something happening where we think we've seen it all before, and all of a sudden we find that Congress has managed to yet come up with another way to make us all sort of scratch our heads. But that's essentially the world that we have to work with here in D.C., and we all have our challenges with the folks that we have to engage with on a regular basis. So the not-so-great state of affairs, and I think if we click on here, this will sort of bring up all these bubbles, and we can bring them all up at the same time. I just wanted to give you a sense of sort of what's driving the debate and the agenda here in Washington, D.C. There on the left, divided government. We have a president and a Senate that's controlled by the Democratic Party. We have the House of Representatives controlled by the Republican Party. So obviously that makes for some clashes of ideology and political philosophy that tends to really bog a lot of things down. We also have a lot of retirements that are happening, some planned. There's quite a number of frankly great champions for child and women's health who are going to be retiring at the end of the year. Of course, I think of Senators Tom Harkin and Jay Rockefeller. And then we've got unplanned retirements. We've got some members of Congress who had every intention of remaining in Washington and coming back here next year, and then they were met with primary elections in their districts and came up short. The most recent, and I think notable, being Eric Cantor from Virginia, who is currently the majority leader in the House of Representatives, but will very soon give up that post and will be leaving Congress at the end of the year. Up on the right-hand side, we've got low voter approval ratings, historically low for Congress, and the President's voter approval ratings aren't that great either. Bottom right, we've got the crisis du jour. I mean, just pick up a newspaper, go online. Every day there's something happening, either in our country or around the world, that causes yet another political or economic, crisis either here or abroad. And, in Congress and the administration, because of that divided government, still haven't found a way to solve a lot of these very difficult issues that really nobody had planned for. And then sitting right in there in the middle, of course, are the election politics that have already infiltrated the process here. In 2014, all members of the House of Representatives are up for re-election, as well as a number of senators. This is, sort of in the mid-year election of the president's current term. Not typically a year that is very kind to sitting presidents, so there's a lot of concern from the Democratic Party that the Republicans may sweep into power in the Senate and hold the House of Representatives as well. which would divide the government even more. But also, you're probably seeing there's already a lot of talk about 2016, which is a presidential election year, and a lot of jockeying for position of potential nominees on both sides, and really neither side, Democrats or Republicans, want to give the other any advantage politically, whether in 2014 or 2016. So, again, all of that sort of leads to a lot of folks looking at issues from the politics rather than looking at the need to have to solve a lot of problems, with national policy, no matter if it's a crisis or something that doesn't quite meet, that standard. So not so great state of affairs. However, I wouldn't come to work every day if I didn't have hope. So the next slide. And here's my hope, which is my analogy of Congress, which is that, looks can be deceiving. And I guess this image of a duck was the best I could come up with. If you've ever observed a duck on the water, I mean, a lot of times it looks like they're not even moving. Maybe they're making some very slow, steady process across a lake or toward a shoreline. But, underneath, those legs, they're still going. They're still trying to get to where they need to go. There's a lot of activity going on underneath the water. And frankly, that is the way Congress and the administration are working together now. There's a lot happening behind the scenes that maybe necessarily doesn't make it into the 6 o'clock news. But, there are a lot of committed members of Congress, committed staff. Certainly the President and his folks are very committed to try and solve these issues. And they're just very challenged right now to come up with solutions. But that doesn't mean that folks don't continue to try. And also that the work that needs to be done to prepare policy to move forward really is a constant process. And it's always happening below that waterline. Next, please. So this will give you a sense of oops, I just lost my screen for some reason. It went to sleep. Now it's back up. So right now, there's sort of a mad dash because, Congress is crashing on two important deadlines. One is their August summer recess. So there's only 6 days left to try and get some work done before everybody leaves Washington, D.C. For 5 weeks. And there's just so much that has to be done in that sort of mad dash. Whether it gets done, I think, is still out for judgment. But all of a sudden it seems that folks look at their calendar every year around this time and say, oh my goodness, we've only got 6 session days left. Maybe we need to get some of these issues put to bed. Once Congress returns from their summer recess in the second week of September, there's only 12 session days that are scheduled before the election. Not a lot of time to get very important work done, which again sort of harbors back to that duck, which is there's going to be a lot of staff level work being done over the summer to try and get legislation prepared on the chance that when Congress comes back in September that if they're given the green light to move an issue forward, that all of that preparatory work has been done. And that's really why it's so very important to be active as advocates over the summer recess, because it's the individuals and it's the organizations that make the loudest noise for the longest time, particularly in those quiet periods, that ultimately are the ones that stick in the minds of legislative staff and members when they come back for that mad dash in September. October 1st, 10/1, is the start of the new federal fiscal year. Right now, it's not looking very promising that Congress is going to have the appropriations bills completed in time. The appropriations process over the last couple years has been less of a process and more about a crisis. And we seem to be heading down that path once again. I think what's going to happen is just to keep the government open, and some of you may remember that a couple of years ago the government actually shut down, and folks want to avoid that because there was a lot of political fallout. There were really no winners to that strategy. So what's most likely to happen is that Congress will pass a continuing resolution. And essentially what that does is for a specific period of time that will be noted in that continuing resolution, the government will continue to stay open and will continue to be funded. My best guess is that the continuing resolution will probably last till after the election, which is the next date, 11/4, November 4th. And then after that, both sides are going to look and see how they did the day after. If the Senate continues to be held by the Democrats and the House continues to be held by the Republicans, then I think it's very likely that Congress will come back for what they call a lame duck session after the election and try and work out the appropriations bills and fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year 2015. If on Election Day the Republicans take control of the Senate, then there's probably a very strong possibility that Congress will not come back because the Republican Party will say, you know what, we'll just wait until January 1st when we will control both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate, and then we'll be in the driver's seat in terms of what the appropriations will be for fiscal year 15. So they'll see little, if any, need to have to come back to Washington and work through issues after the election because they'll just say, well, we'll be in power soon enough. We'll cross the bridge when we get to that point. We can go to the next slide. There we go. I think one of the most important things that I've learned over the course of my career in government relations, and I used to work for a member of my state legislature where I grew up in New York State, is that really every member of a legislature really does count. Whether that person has been here for 20 years or is a freshman lawmaker, everybody has influence. This really is very much reliant on relationships, and folks really learn very quickly if they want to be successful legislators that they have to build coalitions, around issues that are very much important to them, because as these numbers show, in the House you have to have 218 votes to pass a bill. In the Senate, just for a straight vote on a bill, you need 51 out of the 100 senators. But the little glitch, some would say, in the Senate is that in order to move forward to getting to that majority vote, you need 60 votes. So actually the threshold in the Senate is a bit higher than just a straight majority. And 60 votes out of 100 is not that easy to come by, particularly because the Senate right now is very closely divided between Democrats and Republicans. There's only, I think, 5 or 6 seats that separate the majority and the minority. So in order to get those 60 votes, you really do need, a lot of times, all of the Democrats and at least a handful of Republicans, on your side. So that's just very difficult in this very political climate. But ultimately in the Senate, whether it's 51 votes for a majority or 60 votes needed to end the debate, ultimately it can come down to a single senator who can block a bill, what they call is a hold on the bill. If any senator out of the 100 says, you know what, I don't like that piece of legislation, I've got a problem with it, he or she can put a hold on it, and that will basically not allow that bill to come up for consideration on the Senate floor. So when you think about your home states and your members of Congress, and particularly your senators, even if your senator isn't necessarily on a committee of jurisdiction on an issue that's very important to you, whether your senator or member of Congress has been here 20 years or is a freshman, it's just really important to keep in mind that every single one of them count, and you should take advantage of every opportunity to either have a conversation or just a way to communicate what's important to you, because they could very well come back to Washington. They could be that senator who could block a bill, or they could be that member of the House of Representatives who's the 218th vote. So really, don't diminish the importance of your elected officials here that come here to Washington. Every one of them really does play an important role. Next slide, please. Okay, so extra. If you weren't already aware, constituents really do trump lobbyists. Now, you'll read a lot about the importance of money in Washington and the moneyed special interests. But honestly, folks who are voters, who live in the districts of members of Congress, who live back in the home state, really have the power. It's really just getting organized about it, and continually stressing and sort of being that squeaky wheel that makes the difference. As voters, as constituents, your voices carry the weight, and your stories really matter most to members of Congress, more so than any lobbyist in Washington, and I'm one of them. I lobby, for children's issues on behalf of the Nemours. I can try and make the best case I can and the best argument I can make to a member of Congress. But unless I've got folks from back home in Delaware and Florida joining me in those meetings, quite honestly, the member of Congress and the staff person is probably sitting there thinking, there's probably other things that I should be paying more closer attention to if I don't have constituents here telling me that this is important. The other great thing is, you have the power to inspire action in Congress anytime, anywhere. You can do it here in D.C., and I think it's fabulous that folks are going to be coming to Washington in a couple of weeks to advocate for important issues. You can do it back home in the districts. If you're not coming to Washington, D.C., chances are your member of Congress is going to be back home. They're probably going to be having a town hall meeting. It would be great to go there and have an opportunity to raise the issues that are important. You certainly can do it the old-fashioned way. You can still write letters to members of Congress, and you can send emails. And you can also do it through the media, and by earned media, that's something as simple as a letter to the editor. Just again, raising awareness, and whether it's as an individual or on behalf of others, professionally, that you are affiliated with. All those things, again, when folks read about it in the local paper or on the local blog spot, they really do pay attention. Okay, here we go. And sort of speaking of blogging and the local blog spot and so forth, social media is really where it's at, especially for elected officials. The president and most, if not all, members of Congress now have a very active social media presence. They've got Twitter, and they've got Facebook pages. They're really paying attention because it's a very effective and very no-cost way for them to communicate with their constituents. And they also know that folks are most likely to visit Facebook or Twitter than a website. And you'll see with members of Congress, they're really trying to get information, from their constituents via social media, because the response can almost be immediate, and they can also take a look at what's trending in their back home in their district around issues, which will help inform whether or not they're going to vote yes or no for a piece of legislation. They also know that, friends and family, this is how we communicate now. A lot of us don't pick up the phone as much as we used to. We communicate via social media to let folks know what's happening in our lives and what's really important. It's again just a very quick and easy way for them to understand, public opinion. And many of them, they do have their own Twitter accounts, and they have their Facebook pages. it's a very easy way to follow your member of Congress, and you can follow their tweets. You can retweet things that you think are really helpful and important. You can also, like their Facebook page. You can post things, on their wall, and they are paying attention because they know that just a single person can prompt so many others, if hundreds, if not thousands of others, to follow their message and to post their support of issues or comment. These things are all important to members of Congress. And again, all of these things are monitored, by their staff. They actually have staff who are dedicated to monitoring their social media presence. And it's almost a way to follow in real time how an issue is playing out back home. And again, that has a very deep impact on a member's support or opposition for a piece of legislation. And then, there really are kind of some rules of the road when you do communicate with members of Congress, not just on social media, but really in any way, which is really just to keep the message brief and sort of focused on the issue. Make sure that they know how they can follow up with you. If you do, pick up, their Twitter feed, or if you do like them on Facebook, they're going to know how they can communicate back. It's also a great way for you to communicate with others to spread the message. And I think most importantly at the bottom, you really want to be, sort of as presenting your issue in a very sort of measured way. And not be overly reactionary or emotional, certainly not to say anything untoward, to try and keep it as diplomatic as possible. You want the issue to be the thing that the member recognizes most. You don't want he or she to remember that it had a particular tone that was off-putting. For a lot of these issues, there is a diplomatic way to get your point across, and I think whether it's social media or any other means of communication, verbal or written, it's just important to kind of keep it, keep it on the level as best that you can.
Wonderful.
And we can go to the next slide.
Okay. I think that brings us to the paid leave part. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to Chris for sharing such a wonderful bit of nuggets of wisdom of all of your experience and what's going on. It's great to have somebody with their finger on the pulse of what's happening in Washington right now. And so thank you again to Chris, and he will be here again. Just a reminder to folks that you can chat any questions into your webinar control panel at any point, and we'll move on now to talking about our 3 topics for advocacy action in August. But again, we'll be watching the questions, and so if you have any questions for Chris, just chat them into the control panel. So I think we can turn it over to Amelia now, who will be talking to us about the Family Act first.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Megan, and also thank you, Chris, for sharing all of your wisdom with us. As Megan mentioned, we're going to be presenting 3 different advocacy asks for this summer, and all of them connect very closely to different calls to action by the Surgeon General. So first we're going to talk about Action 13, that we work towards establishing paid maternity leave for all employed mothers. You can see the hashtags for paid leave and the Family Act. So the Family Act establishes an Office of Paid Family and Medical Leave within the Social Security Administration. And it's a very well thought out bill. It's funded through very small payroll deductions that come both from the employee and the employer. And that goes into a bank that then entitles every individual to have up to 12 weeks of paid leave annually for the birth or adoption of a child, or to care for a loved one, or to address their own serious health condition, including military caregiving purposes. Another thing that's unique about the Family Act within the Federal Medical Leave Act is that this would apply regardless of the employer size or the employee time on the job. So it really creates a new envelope of access for all individuals to be able to have the time that they need to care for themselves and to care for loved ones. Next slide, please. So currently, on the Senate side, this has been referred to the Senate Finance Committee, and there are 6 co-sponsors. On the House side, it's House Bill 3712, and it's been referred to the House Committee on Ways and Means, and has a phenomenal 92 co-sponsors. I think that, again, this is very much due to the fact that the sponsors, Gillibrand and DeLauro, really thought through very carefully how to build a plan that would be very reasonable and sustainable, and to be able to point to the states where this kind of legislation is already in place and where the evidence case has been built on how this is actually good for business and not harmful to business, and how it increases the loyalty that employees have, while just increasing the general quality of life for all individuals, all citizens in the country. Next slide, please. So how to advocate for this bill? What the ask really is that they please co-sponsor the Family Act, and you can have your priority targets could be Democrats and moderate Republicans, I think that should say, and members of the 2 committees from the previous slide. You want to talk to your representatives and senators. One of the things that we've really been thinking about as we lay out these 3 different asks for you this summer, you really want to do your research. You want to think about learning as much as you possibly can about your congressperson, so that you know what is most likely to be, easy for them to accept and adopt, and what might take, more help in terms of education. So family leave, even though this is a very strong and well-considered bill, and even though there's, so many co-sponsors already, this is an issue that might not be as palatable to every congressperson. So you do want to do your research going in. That said, you can also attend hall meetings and raise this issue. I guess my apologies, the slide is correct that we're targeting Republicans and moderate Democrats. Next slide, please. So when you're talking about the Family Act, it's important to say that this provides workers up to 12 weeks of paid leave annually for the birth or adoption of a child, to care for a loved one, or to take care of one's own self. And also, I think, to highlight that military caregiving purposes also qualify under this bill. Again, that it's funded by small employee and employer joint contributions of 0.2% each. And then the ways that the payout happens is also important to understand. The workers would earn up to 66% of their monthly wages, but there is a capped amount. And that's where kind of the measured, balanced economic approach really comes in. Again, this applies to all companies regardless of the size. And it does set up a new Office of Paid Family and Medical Leave within the Social Security Administration. So the sponsors of the bill really thought out how to administer it within the existing structure in a way to really make it work, make it actionable. Next slide, please. So next we're going to talk about SIMA, the Supporting Working Moms Act, and this is tied very closely to the Surgeon General's call to action to support breastfeeding, action number 14, ensuring that employers establish and maintain comprehensive, high-quality lactation support programs for their employees. We are, you can promote this campaign on Twitter with the hashtag #WorkingFamilies and hashtag #SWIMA. So the Supporting Working Moms Act, or SWMA, expands the current federal law that provides reasonable break times for milk expression. So currently, it's limited to non-exempt or hourly wage earners. And SWMA simply expands the law to cover approximately 12 million additional salaried employees. And it's really important to point out that SWMA scoops in the elementary and secondary school teachers that were excluded when the original federal law was placed within its current statute. And we know how much school teachers deserve and need that support when they're taking care of all our children. They deserve to have the support to take care of their own, and SWMA would extend and include them. So the current status. So on the Senate side, it's Senate Bill 934, sponsored by Senator Jeff Merkley, and it's in the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee with 3 co-sponsors. On the House side, it's House Bill 1941, sponsored by Carolyn Maloney, and it's in the House Education and Workforce Committee, and it has 20 co-sponsors on that side. Next slide, please. So again, the ask is to co-sponsor the Supporting Working Moms Act, and the primary targets are Republicans and moderate Democrats, and the members of the 2 committees that were listed on the previous slide. And please take the opportunity to talk to your representatives and senators. And when you do that, there is a great opportunity to lift up the new Office on Women's Health resource. It's online. If you haven't seen it yet, I strongly encourage you to check it out. It's the Employer Solution Resource Guide, and it is searchable by both industry and by problem area or solution area. So you can take the opportunity to look for local examples that are in that database. So every single industry is highlighted, and common issues that come up around how to accommodate time and how to accommodate space and how to build a supportive culture are all outlined in hundreds of pictures and dozens of videos and lots of depth and breadth and great maneuverability on this website. So if you find your local examples, then you can be not only sharing that resource with your Congress folks, but you can also let them know specifically how it connects in their state. Next slide. So again, the talking points. We already protect hourly workers, and this adds fair inclusion of salaried workers. It really just levels up and covers everybody. And as I said, employers in every sector have successfully implemented the new federal law, and we have this awesome new Employer Solutions resource that everyone can turn to. And it not only demonstrates that this can be done, then it provides learning opportunities for all those other employers that are still working on learning how to do this. It's also important to highlight that this truly is bipartisan. Republican Senator Tom Coburn led the unanimous bipartisan committee vote on the original law. And I think that that's an impressive fact for any Republican in particular that you're speaking to. And then also, lactation accommodation is a win-win-win for families, employers, and the economy. And it adds to the company bottom line through retention and fewer sick days. Next slide, please. So I think I'm going to pass it back over to Megan, but thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amelia. Before we move off of the topic of those 2 workplace-related things, I just wanted to note, I know we have a couple of questions I'm seeing about the link to that Office on Women's Health employer resource. So Kinkini, if you're on and you might have the ability to pull up the link and chat it to all attendees, we'll try to do that now in your webinar control panel, so you should see that come through. We'll also have, sorry? So we'll try to chat that out to everybody now, but we'll also include it on the link with all of the other resources and handouts. So you'll have it a couple of different ways, but it is fabulous, and there are lots of great resources, and it's a great opportunity to look for examples that are highlighting businesses in your states or in your communities, or also, if your legislators have a particular type of business that they may have run in the past or in their family, as you're learning more about them, you can have that at your fingertips to look for the type of business solutions that might appeal to them or they might ask questions about. So a great thing to be tootling around in over the next week as we get ready to go on the visits. So I'm going to talk to us next about an advocacy ask, an opportunity that is related to a couple of different actions of the Surgeon General's call, both Actions 11 about ensuring access to services, as well as Action 8, which is around developing systems to guarantee continuity of skilled care for breastfeeding moms and families. And so this, because it is related to military families, we've highlighted a couple of hashtags that we'll use for social media during the month. MilFams is the one that's being used by the military family organizations, so that's what that means, MilFams, and then we'll also just use breastfeeding because, of course, we're talking about breastfeeding services for military families. So the name of the bill, the original bill, was called the TRICARE Mom Improvement Act. And just to give a little bit of background for folks who may not be familiar, TRICARE is the health insurance plan that covers the 4.7 million military women, as well as women who are in military families. So, military spouses, for example, they are covered under TRICARE. But currently, the coverage provided under TRICARE is different from that that we have begun to be familiar with now under private plans through the Affordable Care Act. So what is currently being covered under TRICARE is breast pumps only for women with preemies and only during their hospitalization. So that pump provision then ends when they're discharged from the hospital. And it's also specifically excluding pumps for personal convenience, even when they're prescribed by a physician. So I'm sure many of us are familiar with what it's like to have the strange patchwork of different types of coverage for different folks and different moms, and this has certainly begun to be problematic for this audience, and if certainly it was even before the Affordable Care Act as well. So this bill, the TRICARE Mom Improvement Act, was introduced to cover breastfeeding support and supplies in alignment with the same coverage provisions of the Affordable Care Act that now apply to private health plans. So its status is a little bit different from the other two bills that Amelia spoke about because the provision of the TRICARE Mom Improvement Act has already been incorporated into another bill, a larger defense bill, which is the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. And this has already happened in the bill's version in both houses of Congress, so that is a really wonderful and fabulous development. And where it's at right now is that the House's version of NDAA was passed in late May, but on the Senate side, it is still pending. Again, it does have the TRICARE Moms provision around the breastfeeding coverage included in it on the Senate side as well, but it's going to be considered on the floor of the full Senate in September is the current thinking. So during this month of the summer recess, we will especially be targeting senators a little bit later down the line, presuming that it does pass through the Senate, and then there will be a conference between the two houses. We might then, in September or in the fall, target specific leaders, but at the moment, we'll be targeting the full Senate, especially since that's where it lands right now. And so how to advocate? The ask really is to support the TRICARE breastfeeding provision in the NDAA. We want to make sure it stays in there and that it passes. So again, the priorities for the month of August will be all senators, as well as, of course, talking to your own representatives and senators. As Chris told us so wonderfully, all of our representatives and senators matter, whether they're on any committees of jurisdiction around military issues or health issues. It doesn't matter. They all have a voice, and they all can have an important influence on the issues that we care about, whether in a positive or a negative way. And I'm sure we've all had stories of how that has happened on both the positive and negative side. So, and again, we want to encourage folks, if you're home during the month of August doing visits in district, that's one option. And you can also attend town hall meetings, which especially your representatives might be having very close to you in your community, and raise the issue. We're particularly thinking that the military angle could be a new opportunity to introduce breastfeeding to some new champions, folks who have not been the usual suspects that we often talk to about breastfeeding legislation. So certainly we encourage you to take advantage of that angle. It might be a bill or an ask that is palatable to different legislators than we might normally prioritize. So it's a great opportunity to build those relationships and to also help make known the work of your state breastfeeding coalition. So talking points, of course, military women and women in military families right now do not have the same access to breastfeeding support and supplies as women on private plans. We do know, of course, that private plans are now required to cover breastfeeding support with no cost sharing. That's, again, the provision of the Affordable Care Act that covers women's preventive services. So this amendment, if it passes all the way through, would align the TRICARE coverage for military families with the private plan coverage, and that is what we are hoping for all women. Before I go on from that, I just want to also mention, in terms of targets, you'll be hearing, if you haven't already, from our staff working on scheduling appointments. And so we do have a lot of resources and links and things to help you to look at who are the key committees that are in charge of the different bills that we've talked about today. So do look at those instructions and appointment information. But again, as Chris said, we certainly are interested in targeting some specific folks, but also very interested in building relationships, and always interested in building relationships with your own representatives and senators. So we'll be hearing more from you and more conversation about that. I also would just highlight about the targets. The reason that we did specifically mention for the two workplace bills in particular that we're targeting Republicans and moderate Democrats is because those two bills in particular tend to get a lot of easy Democratic support, right? We've all experienced this if we've done visits before. It's usually much easier to get Democrats, and we have lots of Democrats on board, in particular with the Family Act, where they have 92 co-sponsors. But in order to really move forward, it's important to have bipartisan support. So that's why our partners that are really pushing the Family Act, and then with the USBC leadership really pushing the Supporting Working Moms Act, we do really want to target Republicans as well as more moderate Democrats, because we know it's easy, low-hanging fruit to have the more liberal Democrats. So that's just a bit more about that. I know it's not as easy to convince and persuade those folks, but with the new Office of Women's Health resource and all of the great resources out there, and the immense momentum that we've had this year around paid leave and the 20th anniversary of the FMLA, there's just a lot of momentum. So we're excited about the opportunities to reach new folks, and this military families angle could again be a way in to talk to some Republicans and get their interest, perhaps starting with the military bill and then leading them into the workplace components that they might not have as natural of an affinity for. So I'll talk a little bit more about researching your legislators in a moment, but first I'm just going to check quickly to see if there's any specific questions related to the bills. We do have a couple of questions about how you identify if your senators or reps are co-sponsors already, and we will have the links to the status. List of all of those names is going to be part of the web page. It's also on the appointment tracker for folks who are going to DC on August 4th. So you'll have those links at your fingertip, and you can very quickly see who is currently signed on as a co-sponsor, because certainly you want to know and not ask them to co-sponsor if they already have. I think that's the main question. We also a couple of questions about just making sure we will be posting the slides to the web page as well as the handouts and other resource materials. So don't be stressing about trying to take notes. I know we've covered a lot, and Chris talked a lot at the beginning as well. So you'll have the recording as well as the slides of this session today. And then the other piece we will have is that the talking points. You'll also have a separate document of talking points for each bill. So never fear, there will be many resources coming out of today's session. So I will talk a bit next about some tips and tools for doing your actual in-person visits. First of all, of course, this goes without saying, but we want to encourage everybody to be patient, be polite. It could be that you get there and there's a meeting running late, or somebody's had to go off to another place, and you might need to be a little bit flexible and patient. So we do encourage that, but of course, be on time and be brief and respectful of the time of the folks you're meeting with. Of course, it is likely that you'll be meeting with staffers. That's almost always the case, but I can't tell you how immensely important it is to be really winning the staffers over. They have such power and such control over what happens in terms of moving different issues forward, different bills forward, and having information brought in front of the legislators. So do not at all be discounting the importance of their experience and their level of power that they can have on the issue. So, again, be polite and be brief and respectful of them and their time. Of course, we are here to educate about issues and want to use facts and statistics where it's necessary, but not to drown them in statistics either. There's lots of different great resources that we have around breastfeeding in general, as well as about these specific bills. So you'll have those, and you might need to bring them out depending on the experience level of the particular person around breastfeeding. Don't be surprised if you have somebody who's new to breastfeeding entirely and has never really even thought about it before. That is very likely to happen with younger staffers. So just be prepared. You might want to ask them right off the bat if a question around their level of experience with breastfeeding, and that will tell you how much to go into, and they'll be very willing to say if they really are new to the issue. So. Again, stress the local connection. We've talked about a few different ways to do that throughout, including looking for local businesses or related industries in the Office of Women's Health tool, because of course that's very relevant to all legislators. They want to know how it's affecting you, their constituents, and their communities and states. And of course, use personal experiences. As Chris said, you have a greater voice than the lobbyists, and they are going to pay attention to your constituent experiences, whether it's from you personally, a friend or a relative, somebody that you've served as a client or a patient. Do tell those stories that will illustrate the need for the policies. You'll also have in our materials, handouts, and talking points, we do have some quotes from moms about the specific topics that we're advocating on, as well as a whole bank of support stories that could be brought out. So we'll have some of those for you in case you don't have a pure personal experience to share. You can also highlight some of those quotes and stories that we have gathered at USBC. Of course, be a good listener. Don't do all the talking. It's always a good idea to start off asking them some questions and learning a little bit more about them. But of course, do ask for something. Eventually, we want to make sure that we make the ask of what you want the legislator to do, and they will likely get around to asking you that if you don't quickly enough. But be strategic. As we were just talking about, we want to make sure that everyone going into a meeting is aware of whether the legislator has signed on to specific bills already. So if they have signed on, of course, please thank them for that. but just be aware that you don't need to ask them to co-sponsor if they already have. But it's a great opportunity to thank them and talk a bit about how important that support is to you and your constituents. And then, of course, follow-up. We'll have some templates available for this as well, but we want to encourage this to be your first conversation. It may be that you've had many before with this particular staff or office, but if it's your first conversation, don't let it be the last. We'll give you some templates for follow-up by email, and again, encourage folks to go to town hall meetings during the month of August and to maintain and continue a relationship with their legislator. I can move my slide here. Okay. So one other bit of advice here as we prepare is to do a little bit of homework on your legislator and research their background in advance. This is pretty easy to do. You can go to house.gov or senate.gov and very quickly find their website for your 2 senators or your representative. And the things we would encourage you to look for, of course, what committees are they on? If they're the committees of jurisdiction of one of these bills, of course, that's key information to know. But it also will be helpful to know what other committees they're on and what issues they might work on. There might be other areas of alignment or linkages and key information to be gleaned from that can help you as you're thinking about how to approach that particular legislator. Look for what other types of legislation they've introduced or co-sponsored. They also might have some interesting information in their newsroom, press releases or media advisories about events that they've held locally. So look for that. That will also tell you quite a bit about them. And of course, look at their own bio. Are they somebody who previously worked in a hospital or in healthcare? Did they used to be a business owner or an entrepreneur? That is going to tell you quite a bit about the person and their leanings around some of these issues, especially around our workplace asks. So do look for that as well in the about the legislator section or the bios. Look at, of course, the impact of the legislation on your particular community or your state. For example, if you have a very large military base in your state, and military families are certainly going to be of very great interest to your legislator, whether they're on a committee that oversees armed forces issues at all or not, that will certainly be have a big impact on their constituents. So look for things like that as well, and just in terms of the general situation and status of your community and your state, and the economy as well can be helpful to think about, and how things are going in your state in particular. Another thing we would recommend, of course, we've given you a menu of 3 different asks possibilities: the Family Act, of course, for paid leave, Supporting Working Moms Act, and the TRICARE coverage of breastfeeding. But you might want to consider, again, given what you've learned about your legislator from doing this research, you might want to consider focusing on 1 or 2 of those 3, or perhaps starting with 1 or 2 and seeing how it goes, again, depending on the political situation with your legislator, with your state, and their interests that you have learned about. It could be that you have somebody who's clearly going to be very interested in the military families piece, and maybe less so on the workplace parts. And so it might be that you spend 20 minutes talking about the military TRICARE part, and then towards the end you also talk about the other. And that's okay. Don't feel like you need to be spending equal time or pushing the conversation in a direction that is not going to be as compatible for that moment. Certainly we want to give you the flexibility to follow where the interests lie, but certainly have the resources to make those asks if when they're appropriate. So lastly, I would just say be prepared to start at the beginning. Again, if you have a staffer who's new or young, they may not have had much, if any, experience with breastfeeding before. So again, have those documents at your fingertips. We'll have, of course, the executive summaries of the Surgeon General's call to action. That's a really nice one to bring out, to put in front of somebody who's totally new, to say, gosh, you know, there's so much we could say about breastfeeding, but it's so important that the Surgeon General did this call to action, and here's a quick summary of that. That is a really nice document to start off with, as well as the CDC breastfeeding report cards that show all the different states. So we'll have both of those options, which are really great starting points if you have somebody where you're really starting from square one in terms of their breastfeeding knowledge. So again, this is just a quick overview of all the different resources that we will have, and of course the website link is at the bottom to our Advocacy HQ. These are all being loaded actually as we speak. We have a bit of a queue going because of the webinar scheduled next week for the Office of Women's Health Employer Resource Launch. So these will be going up throughout the afternoon today, and so you'll have links to fact sheets and sign-on letters on each of the 3 topics we've discussed today, as well as talking points documents. And I would just emphasize that the talking points, we really recommend that these are for you, the advocates, to refer to and use, but not necessarily for handing out. The fact sheet is the component that's really formatted to give to the legislator and the staffer. Lastly, then, for me, we will have, again, and encourage everybody to send a thank you note or email, and we'll have a template for that in the online materials as well. And, of course, we'll also ask that everybody report back if you do a visit, whether on August 4th in DC or whether in district during the whole month of August or throughout the recess time. Please do come and fill out this quick recess action form. This just tells us who got touched, how many touch points there were with legislators, a little bit about what you talked about, and there's a spot for you to tell us how they reacted to each of the different things that you talked about, and whether they seem likely to co-sponsor. You know, we will also follow up in those cases when we hear that from you. We definitely want to know that, because not only will they have a follow-up touch from you in the thank you response, but we will respond to them as well. So. And then one other related piece I want to just mention, of course, August is National Breastfeeding Month, so it's a great opportunity to highlight that to your legislators as well. I know many states also have declared the whole month of August to be Breastfeeding Awareness Month. I know different names in different states. But we will be having our usual social media campaign, and we're focusing this year on breastfeeding in 6 words. And so what this will be is that participants in the campaign will share their personal 6-word stories about what breastfeeding means to them by taking a selfie of themselves holding a sign with their 6-word story. You've probably seen this new phenomenon of lots of different issues and people posting signs with a selfie photo of themselves on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. It's really become a hot method of sharing resources, as well as advocacy and issue-related messages on social media, and really showing a broad array of support of people from all different walks of life posting these photos about different issues has been a really powerful statement for a number of different campaigns. So we're excited to do this, and have been talking with several partners about how we'll be promoting the campaign throughout the month, especially through different weekly focus areas. So each week of August, the campaign will have a specific sector or system of breastfeeding support that we're focusing on. And you can see those listed on the slide, workplaces beginning the first week. And of course, we'll have our usual advocacy tools where you can do an easy click-through and tweet your legislator our pre-made messages, or you can also edit them. But you'll have the tools to find that and do that easily. And each week we'll have a different Twitter tool for the different focus that week. So do watch for that. We're also looking at Twitter chats during each week, we of course have the Wellness Wednesday chats with Moms Rising. Those will be held during the first week for workplaces, and then the last week for families, in partnership with Black Breastfeeding Week and the partners there. So that will be on Wednesday, August 6th, and then Wednesday, August 27th from 2 to 3 Eastern Time. So you'll be seeing more about that. Again, the link at the bottom is the landing page for all the information, and we'll have those dates as well. But just mark your calendars, and we hope we will see you both at the Twitter chats on the Wednesdays and doing the tweeting to your legislators throughout the month. So. All right, we have one more poll to do while I look at the questions that have come in. So let me launch this one. And this one is asking what your plans are. What actions do you think you will engage in over the August recess this year? So again, similar to what we asked about what you've done in the past, could be email, doing a visit in person, phone calls, tweeting, or if you're not necessarily planning to take any actions, that's also, again, an option. So we'll see what we have on the questions while folks are doing the poll. Oh, and thank you, Kinkini. I see that Kinkini did chat the link to the whole audience. So if you see in your webinar control panel, that is the link to the Office on Women's Health Employer Solutions database. Let's see. We have a question about tweeting, and the question is, should we wait to begin tweeting until after the August 4th visits if participating in those? You know, and what I would suggest, I would wait to begin tweeting until August 1st, because that's when the campaign really starts for the month of August. But I don't see any harm in tweeting your 6-word story to your legislator that you're going to visit on August 1st. That whether you do it before or after could be a really nice way to introduce yourself to them or to get their attention afterwards. So I would just wait until August 1st to do that. We will be launching the 6 Words campaign during the USBC events in Washington, D.C. that weekend of the 1st through the 3rd. So we'll actually have stations there for folks to make their 6-word signs and take their selfie, and we'll be providing some technical assistance to people who are using Twitter for the first time. But again, you can do these on either Facebook or Twitter. People do use hashtags on Facebook now, so whether you do it on one medium or the other or both, please do post them, and we're looking forward to seeing those. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share that now and see if there are any other questions for either Amelia or myself or for Chris. And let's see, we have a question about the handouts, and yes, they will be on the website. I'll go ahead and close out the poll display and show you that link again. Here it is. So recording the slides, everything will be posted at this link here. Some of the general information is already there, the typical handouts that we recommend, but the specific ones, the recording for today, will take just a little bit to format, and then we'll get this up as a video link for you. And for other folks, we know there's also folks who are waiting for the recording who are not able to attend live. So if you have other folks in your state coalition, do let them know this link. We'll also be sending it out to everybody who's registered for the Advocacy Day, whether they were registered for today's webinar or not. So they will all receive it. Check one more time on questions. We have a quiet bunch today. I don't have any other questions at the moment, but you have both Amelia's and my email address here. So if others come up, don't hesitate to let us know. And as I mentioned earlier, for those coming to DC, Sarah on our team is sending out messages today to all of the different state delegations. So you'll be hearing from her with instructions and more information about your appointments, as well as the appointment tracker that has links to lots of good information, including the Senate and House phone and office rosters and those lists of co-sponsors for the Family Act and the Supporting Working Moms Act. So look for those there. I think otherwise we don't have any more questions. If there's anything else, Amelia or Chris, that you had thought of to add before we close out the session?
Nothing in particular for me.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Since we don't have any other questions, I guess we'll sign off just a couple of minutes early, and we'll look forward to seeing you in DC next weekend, or hearing from you about your in-district visits or town hall meetings that you may attend during August. So. Wonderful. Thank you. I'm seeing just a couple of thank you notes, but no further questions. So great. Thank you, everyone. We will see you or talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your afternoon.